This is a message to all my supporters of this podcast. I'm introducing a new supporters program. You can contribute a small amount as a one-off payment to show your love for this podcast. Thank you in advance for all your contributions. I just wanted to let you know before we start the podcast that I am doing an online podcast course, how to be able to create, get your guests, scale it and monetize it. So please do go to abmpodcastcourse.co.uk and go into the contact us bit. I'm looking for new people to be able to be a podcast creator and really to be able to develop their skills and knowledge into a podcast. So as I said, go to abmpodcastcourse.co.uk and sign up. Thanks. This is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. I am a corporate employee with an entrepreneurial mindset. This podcast will help and support you with new ideas about business. These are my thoughts, ideas and comments. Today, we've got David Bishop, who is a technologist, a consultant, a researcher and an entrepreneur. Hello, David. How are you?
Just fine. Thank you.
Absolutely excellent. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm glad we finally got this into the diary and we're here. So thank you again. We're going to go all the way back to your education history. So what did you study and where did you study?
I studied computer engineering at Georgia Tech, or the Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta, Georgia. And then I went on to get an MBA at DeVry University. And then I have a doctorate in business administration from Georgia State University.
Okay, so let's go back to your computer science. So were you always fascinated by computing and were you someone who started coding from an early age?
Yeah, I was. I started coding on a Commodore VIC-20 when I was probably 13 years old. And decided I wanted to be a computer engineer probably since about 8th grade, so pretty early on.
Yeah, that's awesome. And did you always know that was you wanted to be in technology as an industry?
Yes, I would say so.
And so what made you go into an MBA? Was it because you wanted to give a further business understanding, or did you want to be an entrepreneur? Was it always something that you wanted to do, or did you want to do an MBA and do a sort of join a company and work long term in a company?
Well, I think that my professors, when I was at Tech, had encouraged many of us to get an MBA back at the time. Having an engineering degree plus an MBA was perceived as being a pretty good combination back at that time. And so I wanted to be able to advance into management. That's one thing I wanted to be able to do, and to understand the financial aspect of engineering as well as the technical aspects.
And did you want to be an entrepreneur?
Yes. That sort of came a little bit later in life, but in the back of my mind, I think it was always there. But the hunger for that and the desire for that sort of grew over the last 15 years or so, 15 to 20 years, I think.
Okay. And so what roles did you do before Agile Worx? And we'll talk about Agile Worx later on in the conversation.
Well, I'd say that, I've been in the technology business about 25 years total. I started out working as a systems administrator, working with Unix operating systems. I worked with what was at that time called Holiday Inn Hotels. So I supported their computer applications and computer systems on site. And then I worked at Bell South for quite some time, Bell South Telecom, working in a variety of different roles there, supporting a lot of their billing and customer care applications, working with IVR systems, as well as the website, bellsouth.com. So I spent a lot of time doing a lot of different things at that company. And then I worked for Delta Airlines for a while, I was the lead architect for their website, delta.com. This is back in, the late 90s, early 2000s when, you still had the internet boom going on. And so that I kind of got sucked into that. And originally I wanted to design, I guess you could say my specialty out of college was VLSI design, very large scale integration, designing computer chips, if you will. But I sort of got pulled into this .com internet boom that was happening at the time, and that's where a lot of my jobs were focused on in the late 90s and early 2000s. So, and then I went back to work for AT&T, which is now the same thing as Bell South, working in telecom, supporting IVR applications and more customer care and billing applications as well. And I had a short stint with a transit agency for the state government. And then, let's see. And then I went to work for in the utilities industry. Stayed there for about 10 years working in power utilities and IoT and that sort of thing, because the internet sort of died down. And then I was looking for what's the next biggest thing. And the next biggest thing I was hearing about was IoT and smart metering and smart grid and that sort of thing. Power utilities seem to be a much better industry to get into than telecom. Right. Telecommunications being very competitive.
Yes.
And so power utilities is a little more stable. So, but yeah, so I spent 10 years in power utilities and learned an awful lot and gained a lot of knowledge there and spent a lot of time doing a lot of different things and with IoT, with smart metering and smart devices and all sorts of things.
So let's just go back to the .com boom. What was it actually like going through that? Because it was a little bit before my time in the sense of working around that time. I was at university in that time. So what was it like? The perception that I've been given from people listening to podcasts and audiobooks about that sort of time, there was just like insane sort of valuations for companies, and sort of the exposure to technology was supposed to be limitless. And so how was it actually going through that period?
I would say it was pretty exciting. And I would say that is probably about accurate. It was definitely a boon. It was valuations there were tons of startups popping up here and there and everywhere, and they had no trouble getting funding and getting money, and they were hiring like crazy, and often hiring people that weren't quite as qualified as they should be because they just had so much cash and so very few people. And there was just a lot of exciting new technologies popping up at the time, and trying to keep up with all the change in the technology, as well as all the jobs and prosperity that came out of it, was exciting and challenging all at the same time. It was a very exciting time. I would say that I worked, like I said, I worked at Delta Airlines during that time for their .com group, as well as Bell South, which became part of AT&T, and it was just in many cases they had there was a lot of funding. There was never any shortage of money. That was probably the best thing about it. There was never any kind of cutbacks on travel or expenditures or training. You would be sent off to training for whatever new application or new technology you wanted to learn, pretty much no matter where you worked. I would say that around 2001, when the .com bubble started to bust, and of course at the same time you had 9/11 and some other things happening right around the same time.
Yeah.
The IT industry, as we call it, as we knew it at that time, it's never really quite come back. It's never been the same. I mean, it's gotten a lot better, and it's had its peaks and valleys since then, but it has never been never quite like it used to be.
Yeah.
The number of jobs and the rapid acceleration you could get in your salary from jump from one company to another, and the ease of getting a good job, and the volume of jobs available has never totally come back since then.
Yeah, the interesting concept I always think is that in the 90s and the noughties, there was an IT industry very much. It was very much support. It was. You said you were an architect as well, which I've got a friend of mine who's an architect, and I think he's absolutely fantastic at being able to balance the business as well as the software demands as well. I suppose my question is, like, do you think that we've now gone into a stage where IT is no longer a separate entity? IT now infiltrates every type of business, whether it's, so I work for a consultancy firm and I work in their software department, and now more and more it's now ingratiated into every part of business now, rather than where very much I would imagine there was an IT team that worked on various various problems and solving and adding value. How has that changed in that now, for example, everyone has a smartphone, everyone has a laptop or a desktop? What's the difference between what it was like then, when you were very much in an IT bubble, to now where IT infiltrates every part of business?
I think the stakes are a lot higher now. What I mean by that is because technology is integrated into everything we do and pretty much all parts of our business. If something breaks, it has a greater impact and a more profound impact.
Yeah.
I remember working for Delta Airlines. We had a competition between CNN, which was also based here in Atlanta, and they would report on us if our website went down, and we would try to do the same thing to them. There was this little competition, but that's all there really was to it. If the website went down, well, all that really matters is operations, getting planes up in the air. But now that's changed. We've seen where technological failures today are more than just have more than just a financial impact or an inconvenience. It can get people killed, like with the Boeing 737 MAX. Bad software, got 346 people killed, basically. And then you see these failures popping up with Capital One and Equifax, and I think Chase Bank just a week or so ago had a problem where a lot of customers were, had the wrong balances show up in their accounts. So we're seeing how technological problems now have a much greater impact. The stakes are a lot higher.
Yeah.
But at the same time, companies are still to a certain extent look at IT as an expense, and are always seeking ways to reduce costs. IT is essentially a people business. So what that really means is, hiring people that are cheaper, which typically is, comes down to people that may not have quite the training or the background that others may have. And so you see a lot of problems with quality, and a lot of and security as well. And many security breaches, I think about 85%, I think I read this somewhere, are inside jobs, really, when it comes to security breakdowns. And so, my concern is that, and a lot of my colleagues' concern is that these kinds of failures are going to become more prominent and more severe over time. And I think you're going to see that when they do happen, they're going to have a greater impact on corporations and their leadership, and can create an outcry for change. With the Equifax situation, the people in charge lost their jobs, and there were some sweeping changes initiated internally because of that. And so I think that companies need to think about that and maybe put more resources and have second thoughts about cutting back on IT when it's actually so tightly ingrained with their operations, as it is with most corporations today. Because if it fails, it's going to have a severe impact on your business, and it could have a severe impact on your leadership and on a lot of jobs and things like that. So
yeah, and I've worked in software for a while now, and look, I'm not being critical of outsourcing per se, but a lot of the trend now is in the UK where I am that they want to outsource certain parts of the more technical aspects of software to India, Eastern Europe. There's very Philippines. There's various places where that. What's your sort of view on their quality or the standards that are kept when you're outsourcing a lot of your software development?
Right. Well, it depends. You can have the quality can go either way. I've been in charge and worked with outsourced groups that did very, very well, and some that did not. A lot of it has to do with assimilation and training. So, in one company where we had a large outsourcing effort, initially it didn't go well, and there were a lot of bumps in the road. But the reason for that is because the current employees really didn't want to transfer knowledge over to the outsourced people for obvious reasons. They were worried about their own job security. So there wasn't a lot of cooperation and knowledge sharing for quite some time. Now, eventually they got past that gap by making some changes in leadership, but it takes time. And but yes, outsourcing can be a problem. And what many companies are doing now is looking for other options, because even with outsourcing, one of the problems is often language and cultural barriers, which results in misunderstanding of requirements and misunderstanding of specifications. And that happens quite a bit too, and that's where a lot of the problems result from. And one of the things they're trying to do to get past that is looking for different ways to hire domestically for the same pay rates. Like, for example, Apple CEO Tim Cook, he was quoted about, there's a quote about him talking about, and of course I'm paraphrasing here quite a bit, but there's the idea that many corporate leaders want to try and train high school graduates to do coding and not hire college graduates. And so the idea is, we're giving all these people this opportunity. We're giving all this training and knowledge and opportunities they wouldn't normally get, so that they don't have to go to college or incur debt or whatnot. But in reality, what he wants is $15 an hour software developers.
Yeah.
That's really the motivation behind it. So, and that's one way where they try to get past the cultural and language barriers. But the problem there is you're going to have other barriers, because most software development, even though it's gotten easier over the years in some ways with sophisticated tools and other types of libraries and extensions and languages that are not as difficult to learn as what we used to have to learn back in the day. It still requires some type of a pretty good level of proficiency in math and science, which typically requires your smarter kids. It's still not easy, technically.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree. The language and cultural barriers and if a company is not investing their time in developing those relationships, there's going to be a disconnect, because they think a requirements is saying X and Y, and in the UK or US or wherever they're sourcing this out, so they might say it's ABC, and there is that just disconnect between the two. And I would say, in my experience, those companies that invest time, money, and effort into those outsourcing capabilities can actually get it very good, can get a very good setup. But it's the cultural and language issues for me that is stopping such success. And you've said it in the same way, that in a different way, but in the same way, taking school leavers, they don't have the knowledge and the extent of experience and understanding culture and how the company wants to work, that there's always going to be a disconnect there.
Right.
Okay. So a word that's been brought into general business is regarding agile or agility. So I've worked in I would say pure agile workforce and teams that are working very hard to implement the agile methodology in its purest sense from a software point of view. But what's your view on agile being used now in general business and how people are working flexibly? How do you feel about that sort of different terminology being used for the same words in software?
I think it can help, but I have some concerns because, I think definitely Agile is more than just a development methodology. Agile is a different way of doing business because you have to change the way that you work with customers and interact with customers and develop requirements and develop your product roadmaps as well as the code and how you manage your teams. Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes it is taken too far where, everybody has to be agile. Our HR department has to be agile. Our legal department has to be agile, and the janitors have to be agile, and everything. So I think there are, in some ways, it may go just a little bit too far in that respect. Not that those things can really hurt, I suppose, but it sort of loses focus of what Agile is really all about, which is about competition. And that's what I talk about in my book about being number one in the market. That's really what Agile is all about. Agile is a software derivative or an application of lean manufacturing techniques for the software industry, which is a derivative of the Toyota production system that we all know about, which helped Toyota become number one or close to, a leading manufacturer and leading auto manufacturer in the world. And they went from making tin can cars to making some of the best vehicles in the world. And these lean manufacturing techniques were the reason for them being able to accomplish that. And so agility is a software adaptation of that type of methodology. And so that's the point of it, to become number one in your market. And all too often I hear agilists and other people push agility as a way to, it's going to make our teams work better together, or it's going to make us all happy, or it's going to, they apply agile in ways that is not really what it's all about, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's a concern. I can't say that it can't always help, but it's not really the point. And it gets diluted. Yeah, it gets a little bit diluted, I think.
Absolutely. So you talked a little bit about your book. So tell me about your book, Metagility. So what is Metagility, and how does it sort of impact software and business wider?
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hi, I'm Alex, the host of X Health Show. Meet the future of healthcare. Think X-Men, that's X Health. Actual superheroes behind programming living cells to cure cancer once and for all. Tech that detects preterm delivery in seconds, brain-computer interface, or apps that employ AI to match your disease with the best treatment. X Health Show brings to you visionaries who push the boundaries of healthcare from Switzerland, the heart of Europe, and the most innovative country in the world. Let me introduce you to their startups. Head to X Health Show, meet the future of healthcare. Happy to greet you there.
Well, Metagility is essentially a new framework for managing agile transformation and development. So there are a lot of frameworks out there. There's a SAFe, Strategic Agile Framework for the Enterprise. There's DA or DAD or Disciplined Agile, which was recently purchased by PMI. And there's LESS, there's DSDM, there's a few others. Metagility is a new framework based on 10 years of research that I conducted a number of different case studies. And it focuses on what are some of the things that companies did to become number one in their market using this approach. What did they do right, and what did some of these companies do wrong? And what Metagility does is it encapsulates, from a research perspective, what these companies were doing right. And it productizes that into a framework that would allow other companies to duplicate the same results. Most of these other frameworks are not really research-based like mine is. Mine is based on over 10 years of engaged scholarship research using a scientific methodology to build it. Which I don't believe the other frameworks are. Metagility is also a patented framework. It's got a U.S. patent, which was issued just late last year. I don't believe the other frameworks have that. It has a couple of features because of the reason why it's patented is because it has a couple of unique features. And one of those is it's based on the theory of agile vorticity, which came out of my research, which tells you how agile you are in the market. It essentially provides a methodology to measure your agility. And that's sort of been the holy grail in this industry for quite some time, because many companies have argued that, okay, well, we've done all this agile transformation. We've become as agile as we think we can, but we're not sure where we stand. How agile are we? And how much more agile do we need to be? And if we need to be more agile, then what do we need to do to get there? Because most companies focus on just the mechanics of agility, implementing Scrum teams and setting up their backlogs and just all the mechanics of the Scrum methodology, which is one very commonly used. And well, what do you do after that? For many companies, they don't get that far. Many of them end up with like more of a watered down version of agility. But for the companies that do, where do they go from there? What's the yardstick for improvement and success? And so Agile Vorticity answers that question. And that's very important. And it also, one of the biggest challenges in the industry is, and which was the impetus for me writing this book, is how do you adapt Agile to embedded systems development? And what I mean by that is Agile has been mostly geared towards the software industry, but most innovation today is happening with embedded systems. Like embedded systems are applications where you have hardware, firmware, and software components developed by different tracks that have to be released as one cohesive product. That means your cell phone, smart devices, smart cars, IoT. That's where all the innovation is really happening today. There's not a whole lot just with software like it was 15 to 20 years ago. It's more about devices today. And so how do we develop agile devices? And many companies are struggling with how to do that because it's much more complex and much more difficult than just plain software. And so the book answers that question too.
So you've mentioned a couple of times about Internet of Things, IoT. So is this something that you're passionate about? It sounds like you had some impact earlier on in your career. Does that still, because it's a very exciting area of technology at the moment. There's a lot going on at the moment. What's your view on IoT?
Well, yeah, I think it is. I think it is pretty exciting. Over the past 10 years or so, I've seen that industry grow quite a bit, and it's, I would say it sort of replaced just the internet, and websites and e-commerce, which I used to be excited about 15, 20 years ago. Now it's more like IoT, because today it's more about devices, not just software. And there's no limit. I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff out there to think about. I mean, you've got, your cell phone, you've got smart metering or smart grid, you've got all sorts of smart IoT devices, smart cars, smart planes, smart thermostats, and smart appliances. The idea that and robotics, of course, and the idea that embedded systems could be integrated into every aspect of our life is pretty exciting. And these are taking all sorts of different forms. And how do we develop these devices in an agile way has been a big problem. And so it's been a big area of interest for me for the past several years.
So one of the things I'm passionate about is cars, all types of cars. What's your sort of view on driverless cars?
Oh, well, I'm a car guy too, by the way.
Right, good.
Yes, I have my doubts about it. I mean, I just first of all, I love driving.
Yes, me too. Yeah.
I know a lot of people don't, but there's a lot of people that can't drive for whatever reason, and so it's very good for them. But for those of us who love to drive, I don't want that taken away from me. I'm concerned about the legal ramifications of it. If there's an accident, who's really at fault? The manufacturer or the owner of the car? And have the laws caught up with that? I don't think it's happened enough. There's been a couple of incidences, I think, with a Tesla. I think I read a while back where there was some kind of an accident, but I don't know that there's been enough to really, to impact legislation, in terms of, who's going to be at fault when things go wrong.
I totally agree. I think it's a massive sort of area, a grey area that we've not really come to a conclusion with. But that happens in all types of technology. The fact of I've been watching Facebook, and Facebook maybe 5 years ago were for freedom of speech, and they would let any type of release go into Facebook, and they would have ads, and it was fine because it was freedom of speech. They've been heavily criticized about Google Analytics, and now we've found a phase where people like Google, people like Facebook are now having to make judgment calls on content. And I kind of find that's a real grey area for a Facebook to make judgments on, because they're only going to, if they stick by the law or they stick by what they think the moral compass is, there's going to be various attacks from other groups saying you're discriminating against me, or you're not letting me have my voice. What do you see as the grey area for technology and legislation and regulation?
Well, I think that's such a slippery slope, And when I was, what I remember back from the 90s, when I was getting into when the internet boom was happening, I was getting into this industry. I mean, it was always, everything was an open forum. There were never any restrictions, and that was always very important. I think at least in many countries, and I remember here in the States, it was always very important that we didn't put any restrictions on commerce, and that was always sort of the golden rule, no matter what website it was or forum it was, that, it was, there were no restrictions, that it was kept open. And that's changed. I mean, I made some purchases through eBay recently, and they charged me taxes. It used to be that you could buy tax-free on the internet. So now they're charging sales tax. And slowly but surely things are creeping in to restrict e-commerce, and the taxes is one thing, but then the limitations on who decides what is okay to publish on a website and what isn't, and that's a very slippery slope. I'm not sure where we're going there, but I don't think it's a good thing long term.
Yeah, I'm really stuck, because, as you say, freedom of expression, freedom of voice is very important. But if they are, it's giving a moral compass to a large global company like Facebook or Google, and right. They are not a moral, I'm not saying they're immoral, but they're part of being a business is not to be moral. It's to make profit. It's to be innovative. It's to develop software, develop hardware, whatever it is. Their role isn't really there to be a moral compass for the general public. I find it a real troubled area, and I don't think we've come to a conclusion yet. And I can see this going on for another 10 years on making an assessment on how that moral compass is supposed to be set.
Yeah, well, it's for many years there was no one or two companies that were big enough to be able to have that kind of control, and now Facebook is. We've reached what was it? Theodore Roosevelt back over 100 years ago. He was known as the trust buster because he was going around breaking up these big conglomerates of companies that had too much control. I think from an internet perspective in this industry, we've reached that point where we have these big, maybe not trusts per se, but these big corporations that have a little bit too much control over everything, and they may need to be busted up or broken up, because we really can't have these big conglomerations of companies that have that much control over the internet and social media.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, let's move on from there. So I read somewhere that you said that leaders in business should consider agility, flexibility, and leanness. Why did you say this?
Yes, that's right.
Why did you say this?
Because it's very important that any leader in this industry, you have to have agile leaders as well as agile developers, agile coders, agile testers, agile project managers. It's very important that your leaders are also agile and that they adapt to those values, because any type of agile transformation has to have very strong executive support to be successful. And studies show that transformation efforts that don't have that support with leaders that don't have that mindset, they typically don't do too well. The success rate is very low.
What sort of companies, you don't have to say exact companies, you can say sort of industries. So what sort of leaders in business are struggling when it comes to agility, flexibility, and leanness?
Well, let's see, which ones are struggling? I would say that, your older industries that are maybe not so technology focused, but being forced to be more technology focused because that's the way things are going, as we alluded to earlier, how technology or IT isn't just a department down in the basement that takes care of your email. Now it's becoming integrated into all aspects of your business. So for example, I was recently working with a big insurance company, or talking with a big insurance company in recent weeks who, they've had a lot of struggles with agility and they don't think it's important for them. And they have a lot of problems with their constituency or their employees saying, well, we don't need to improve. We don't need to do any better. We're fine the way we are. But they're experiencing a lot of growing pains because competition is forcing them to adopt a lot of new technology and develop the capability to support this new technology. And that means being more agile. And, what kind of company says, how can you allow your employees to say, well, we don't need to improve? I mean, if I said that anywhere I worked, I think I wouldn't be working there very long. Anytime you go for a performance review, your boss is going to say, well, you did great, Mark, this past year, but we want you to see you do this much better next year. Continuous improvement, that's the Kaizen culture that came out of the Toyota production system. That's what Agile is all about. You're always looking to continuously improve. And I can't imagine when you hear company leaders echo that sentiment, it's really sad and backward. And some of these like insurance and other industries where, well, maybe not all insurance companies, but there's companies in all different types of industries that are having this problem. But that's just one example. It was an insurance company, but there are companies and industries which are not technology focused, where they're not really selling technology, but they're having to adapt and use technology for their business that they didn't really think they would have to, and being kind of forced into it. That's where you see a lot of the problems.
And what's your view on retail? So we've got in the UK, e-commerce, especially in COVID time, has just boomed. You're talking like hundreds of % sort of increase. There are a couple of companies that are very popular in the UK. You might not know, Primark is one of the big companies in the UK who don't have an online presence and have really struggled through COVID. How does the retail sector, it might not be your particular niche of understanding, but what's your view on retail sector that is struggling so hard for footfall and actually people going into their store, and they really have to change to e-commerce? What's your view on the retail sector?
Well, I think they're definitely having a hard time. I know Macy's, which is I think their technology department, or most of their technology workforce is located here where I'm at. They've laid off a lot of people, and Macy's is a very big retail chain here in the States. And many others I've seen as well. But of course, many retail companies have been in trouble for quite some time.
I'd agree.
Here in the States, Sears, for example, and JCPenney's have been in turmoil for quite some time, and they've been closing a lot of stores. And I think COVID-19 has sort of put the nail in the coffin for many of them. And it's kind of sad, Sears being a very old company, which started out with catalog sales. So you would think, wow, why couldn't they translate that to online sales? And they moved too slowly. But it is having a very big impact in the retail industry for sure. Amazon is sort of an example of what we talked about earlier, one of those big conglomerates, one of these big internet companies that is getting very, very big and very, very powerful, similar to how the trusts were back over 100 years ago. So it's interesting to see how that's going to play out. And many of these retail outlets, of course, have lagged behind. In terms, they all have internet presences, but it's in many cases it's not very good. It certainly isn't as good as Amazon's. And so they haven't invested in technology as much or as early as Amazon did. They're paying the price now.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm fascinated to see what happens in the next 10 years, or even 5 years, to be honest. Things are moving so fast. The retail sector, I think, has to adapt or die. And there's been examples of that. Toys R Us, Kodak, who have not been able to adapt and have really suffered. Okay, I'm going to bring the subject slightly differently. So what do you think is more important for a business? Is to have a vision or to listen to the market?
Well, that's a good question. I think that you have to do vision is very important. I talk about that a lot in my book because when you're developing a product roadmap, in my book I talk about that roadmaps are really replaced by visions. When we talk about agility, we talk about agile versus plan-based approaches. You got to have a plan. In the waterfall world and agile, where you don't really have a plan, right? You don't necessarily have this well-defined product roadmap that's 18 to 24 months long, but you do need to have a vision for your company. And what that means is that you're setting this vision for your corporation or your company or your team, and you're always evaluating that vision against the market. You're always, it's very important to always try to make sure that you can't really develop a 18 to 24 month product roadmap, a well-defined product roadmap in most industries today. And so the companies that were the most successful were companies that had a vision, and they evaluated new customers based on that vision. So in other words, they developed relationships with customers that were going to take them where they wanted to go. Customers that were going to give them the referrals that they wanted, customers that were going to partner with them to do testing, customers that were going to support them in getting this technology, this new innovative technology out the door. And that's very important. And with some customers, they had customers that said, well, we want this product to be absolutely perfect and when it's delivered and with no defects. And they decided, hey, we're not going to work with those customers because they're not going to take us where we want to go. They're not going to help us fulfill the vision we have for our company to become number one in the market and to get more IoT devices out there than our competition, or to get this innovative technology out the door before the competition. And so you have to have a vision of where you want to go, and new customers, new clients, you're always evaluating those against that vision. Are they going to get you there? Because with Agile, your clients are really more like partners in many ways, especially early on with new companies, startup companies. They're going to be more like partners. They're going to be your testers, and they're going to be your guides to the market need to some extent. And so that relationship is very important, especially early on. And companies that do that right have become number one in their market long term, and that's very important. So yeah, you're always going to listen to the market, but I think the vision is much more important.
So what's your sort of view on being first to the market or coming later? So the prime example for me is sort of technologies in mobile phones. I've got an Android phone, I've got a Samsung phone, and I like that they are nearer to the cutting edge of technology when it comes to mobile phones versus Apple, which have developed since Tim Cook came along to not necessarily be first to market, but do it the best, to be best practice of developing that technology. What's your view on being first or best into the market?
Well, the studies show, and a lot of my research, that companies who manage to grab that early initial market share, a significant portion of that early market share, have the best chance for long-term success.
Right. Okay.
Most of the time.
But
Not
Apple,
always,
but
but
Apple
most
is a
of the time.
different case because Apple is not cutting edge technology, but they are taking large market share in most countries, because it's slightly different. Theirs is so ingratiated into their branding, and people buy into the brand, but they've created a way of approaching the market that they're not going to be first, but they'll just do it the best that anyone can do it when they get to the market. Is that unique to Apple, or is that a technology trend as well?
I don't think it's unique to Apple, but Apple, when they came out with the iPhone, that was definitely a game changer.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about that, and I don't think anyone else had a device quite like that. So in many ways, they created a new market with that device, and they were the first in it.
And for me, that's based on Steve Jobs. The iPhone, the iPad, the iPod. He basically created whole industries from being first in the market and doing it the best. But I suppose my question is more to latter days, when you're talking about Tim Cook, who is not so necessarily so innovative, but sort of, as I said, I've got an Android phone and I'm very happy with it. I enjoy using it, but I do think there is a large portion of let's just say UK and US. I can't talk about many other markets are beyond that, but their ambition is not to be first. Their ambition is that once they do it, no one's going to be able to compete with us because we have the best technology, the best software, the best hardware.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's certainly possible. I mean, it's certainly possible. It's I think it's harder to do, but it's certainly possible.
Okay. Right. What's your principles on project management as a role within technology versus other types of business? Is project management critical in a technology business versus other types of business?
I think so. I think that project management is very critical to the technology business. With Agile, there's been a lot of discussion as to what is the role of a project manager in Agile, because you have Scrum Masters and you have developers, and there's oftentimes not really a well-defined role for project managers. The PMI, the Project Management Institute, they recently purchased this Agile Framework DA, which does not have a defined role for the project manager, and many people have criticized that they bought an Agile framework that does not have a defined role for their own institution. But I think it is very critical to technology management. And of course, manufacturing in many ways, and also construction is very important as well in other industries, but especially for technology. I think there's always going to be a role for project managers, and it's always going to be critical, not just for reporting, for accountability, and for, I would say, just providing that linkage between program and project management and leadership and the individual contributors within the teams. I think that's very important.
Okay. So you're a technologist, you're a consultant, you're a researcher, you're an entrepreneur, you're an instructor. You're also CEO and founder of Agile Worx. So tell me about your day-to-day role in the company.
So I wear pretty much all the hats in the company. We do three things here at Agile Worx. Essentially, we do consulting and training, and we also provide some software development. I have a set of software tools that help facilitate the process and the framework which I've created. But the emphasis is definitely on the consulting and the training aspect, and especially the training. So I'm always working to develop additional course materials, as well as looking at different ways to make my courses more engaging, more informative, as well as to provide greater value to my clients in terms of additional certifications. Like recently, one of my courses was endorsed by the IABA, looking to also get additional endorsements from an accreditation from IC Agile, which is in the works right now. So I'm always either working on new course material, or new course ideas, or promoting the courses and trying to get the word out there to help spread the word about Metagility and what it can do for your teams and your group and your organization.
So do you do coding languages? Do you do project management? What's the sort of breadth of your different courses that you run?
The courses are largely based on the book, and so I have a course called Metagility for Practitioners, where I teach the Metagility framework. It's a 2-day course, and I have a course that is focused more on program managers and corporate executives, and another course is focused more on agile coaches. I also have courses on product ownership, how to move from a waterfall business analyst to an agile product owner. Courses on introduction to agility and agile concepts. Courses on metrics. So I developed a lot of my own metrics, as well as helping people determine, well, what metrics should they use, for their organization or their teams. There's a ton of metrics out there, but there's really only a few that are really, really valuable in my mind. And I try to help people go through the exercise of understanding how those metrics work and how to apply them and to figure out what's best for them. So I've got probably a curriculum of about 6 courses on my website right now, and I'm always looking to add a few more.
And how important is metrics to you? Because accountability, reporting, all these sorts of important parts of it is all based on creating some sort of metrics to be able to measure how you're progressing, how you're developing. So how important is metrics to your courses and how you sort of teach those courses?
Well, I've always said that what gets measured gets done. And, there has been some controversy about metrics in the Agile world, because many people, there's a lot of Agile pundits, if you will, have expressed concern about metrics, because they believe that that the teams will try to game the system. If you start measuring a team success based on velocity or based on burn down charts or whatnot, they'll seek out ways to sort of instinctively game the system and make those metrics look better than they really are. And they'll still get so focused on the metrics that they're not as focused on quality and productivity and that sort of thing.
Right.
And there's some truth to that, but I think you can work around that by developing a more comprehensive metric solution. That's the biggest mistake many teams and organizations make is they only focus on 1 or 2 metrics. They're only looking at the burn down chart all the time, or they're only looking at velocity or whatnot. Well, you're going to have problems with people gaming the system if you do that. You have to have a comprehensive solution using several metrics to measure team and organizational success. And if you do that, then you're going to have a lot of checks and balances against people and groups trying to game the system. So I think a comprehensive approach is very important.
I think that's so important as well. Okay, we're coming to the end of our interview. So I ask 5 questions to everyone that I interview. They're short, sharp questions. They don't need short, sharp answers, depending on what you want to tell me. So what was the best decision that you made?
The best decision I made? Oh, that's a good question. Oh, gosh. Made some bad decisions, so I'm trying to find the best one.
We'll come to that as well in a minute.
I've got to go pretty far back here. I think one of the best decisions was, focusing more on business than just the technology, and getting into, when I talked about earlier about the MBA and the doctorate in business. Just I love technology. Technology is where I started, right? But I got a lot of frustration early on in my career, because I realized a lot of the things I was working on or trying to fix were based on bad decisions by management. And I thought, well, gosh, these people need help. So I felt like I could have a greater impact by doing that. Yeah. And I felt like having that technology background plus the management background allowed me to have a much greater impact on teams and corporations in that way. So I think that was probably my best decision is making that transition.
I would totally agree. The best software engineers and architects that I've encountered are the best because they balance not just the technology demand, also the business demand as well. So I think that is a incredibly valuable thing. Next question. What's the best advice you've been given?
The best advice I've been given, I would say, never give up. Just be persistent. Persistency pays off. Stickability pays off. I learned that very early on, and that's always worked for me. That doesn't mean that if things appear to be not doing so well, that doesn't mean that you don't change. You always have to keep an eye out for if you're on a new business venture or a new project, or if you're becoming an entrepreneur. If you left your day job and you're working on a startup business, you may need to pivot. You may, if you're not able to bring in customers, if it doesn't look like it's working, you don't just stick with it until you've completely destroyed yourself financially. At some point, you've got to change. Yeah. But I think stickability to your values and being persistent on your goal is very important, and that's worked for me.
Awesome. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
Helped me most. Now, that's a good question. I would say my family and perhaps my father's always been a mentor for me. So I've always gone to him for advice.
Awesome. Do you have any regrets?
Regrets? Sometimes I have some regrets about the technology industry. Sometimes I get frustrated and think that maybe I should have been an anesthesiologist or something, or I could have just been a medical doctor and or something like that. Sometimes I have those regrets, thinking that technology in some ways looks like it. Sometimes it appears like the growth opportunities haven't come along as easily as I thought they would, or at least as they appeared they would be, or at least I was told they would be. Back in the day, I can remember in the 80s and 90s when I was coming up through school, technology was pushed very hard. Oh, well, there's an endless supply of money and opportunity in this industry. And that, as we mentioned talked about earlier, that sort of was pretty severely checked in 2001. And so I've always wondered, well, did I make the right decision long term? But I think I've made the right decision.
I think you've done pretty well in the industry, to be honest. And just thank you for your honesty, because I ask that question and I get a mix of different answers. Sometimes it's very much like, no, I have no regrets because I am here and I'm just a result of everything that I've done. And then I get some really people like you've just answered that is really honest, and it's like, well, if I'd have done something slightly different, where would I have been? So I thank you for your honesty. What are you most proud of?
Most proud of? I would say my ability to, being able to cut the ties to working a regular 9-to-5 job with a large company and go off on my own, I think is one of the things I'm most proud of recently.
Yeah.
So I'm also very proud of my family and very proud of my time at Georgia Tech as well. So those things are very, very close together.
Fantastic. Okay, that's my 5 questions. Where can people find you?
They can go to agileworx.com. That's AGILE-WORX.com. That's my primary website. There's all sorts of resources on there for training and finding out more about Metagility and where to purchase the book. You can also reach me at david@agile-worx.com. And also check out our course registration site at metagility.technology. If you're interested in maybe registering for a course, you can do that on that website and find out a little bit more about the curriculum.
That's been wonderful. Thank you, David, for your time. It's been really fascinating to delve deep into agility and technology. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.